Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time you happen to be watching this. I hope you're having a really good day. I'm switching things up from the tentative schedule and moving to logical fallacies. I'm also doing logical fallacies out of order. I believe this is part three, and I know I've only done one part so far. One of the reasons I did the switch is simply it made no sense to me to begin the novel and then have a week of conferences. We will begin the novel after conferences. As always, all images were stolen from the web for educational purposes. Text was also stolen for educational purposes. For you Google bots and YouTube bots, this is to help my students. I'm not monetizing the video. Unless otherwise indicated, page numbers refer to Everything's an Argument with Readings, the 8th edition. And for my students, this is not a formal paper. Be sure you cite your sources better than I did. Once again, on the why bother question, the appropriate use of emotional, logical, and ethical appeals in argumentation, misusing logic in any way, whether it's an emotional or logical or ethical appeal, creates logical fallacies, and that's why we're spending some time going through them today. First one is a hasty generalization. Sometimes it's called an overgeneralization, and what it is it's making a claim on an evidence base that is just too small to support the claim. As the bottom sentence says, you can't make a claim and say that something is true if you only have an example or two as evidence. So, we have, did you hear about teenagers who vandalized the park? Teenagers are irresponsible and destructive. One example does not prove the fact that all teenagers or most teenagers are irresponsible and destructive. You can't make the broad claim based on one single example. These pictures, by the way, also came from the Excelsior Online Writing Lab. Some other quick examples of hasty generalization. My grandfather, who smoked a cigar every day, lived to be 101. Smoking cigars, therefore, doesn't seem to affect people's health. The fact that Grandpa was an anomaly doesn't allow you to make a generalization about one person, or even three or four people, when there's a large case study after case study that shows that people who smoke have lung cancer and higher risks of lung cancer. You can't use one or two people to prove the point. Another hasty generalization: Ford trucks are terrible. My friend's Ford truck is always in the shop. And as you can see, the internet backs up this claim because Ford stands for Fix or Repair Daily. So obviously, if the internet says it and one friend had a bad Ford truck, it must be true. And again, I'm giving you an example of a hasty generalization. Obviously, it's not true. The next one is faulty causation. It assumes that because one event or action follows another, the first one caused the second. And what it basically does is it concludes that the second thing had to have happened because the first thing happened, and they have to be linked. The human mind wants to find links, but a lot of times the links just aren't supported by the facts. It's also called the post hoc ergo propter hoc, which means after this, therefore because of this. Something happened, then something else happened, and the first event was obviously caused by the second. This example comes from UTEP. AIDS first emerged as an epidemic back in the same era when disco music was becoming popular. Disco caused AIDS. John Travolta, the guy who made disco what it was for far too long, is a prime example of, showing that old trends never die. But the link between AIDS and disco is the fact that they occurred at the same time. It doesn't prove that one caused the other. And also, I think it's important to understand that a lot of times the faulty causation gives us all sorts of reasons to form stupid superstitions. During this past summer, the Minnesota Twins lost every time I watched a game. I'm not going to watch any Twins games this season. If I want to add to the stats, the Minnesota Twins are 42 and 101 versus the Yankees since 2002. However, last week, in a spring training game that I didn't watch, the Twins beat the Yankees 10-7. This proves that I should never watch a Twins game, especially a Twins game against the Yankees. The correlation isn't there. The two events are not correlated at all. My lack of watching had nothing to do with the win. Next, begging the question. It's also known as circular reason. And one accepts the conclusion without providing any real evidence. Most of the time, there's a premise, and the premise is repeated with just different words. And once that happens, they say, see, told you so. It's circular. It just repeats and repeats and repeats. It goes in a circle. So, the rights of the minority are every bit as sacred as the rights of the majority. Nobody's going to argue that. The majority's rights have no greater value than those of the minority doesn't explain why the rights of the minority are every bit as sacred. It just repeats the same exact point. Repeating is not proving. And the same one, the MacBook is the best laptop on the planet because no one makes a better computer than Apple. That doesn't prove the point. It just repeats that Apple makes great computers, the MacBook's a great computer. It doesn't tell me how or why the MacBook is better. And let me give you a quick grammar bonus here. Circular reasoning begs the question does not mean poses or raises the question. You will hear hundreds, perhaps thousands of times someone make something and say, this begs the question, when they mean this raises the question. Circular reasoning is a logical fallacy. Begging the question is the form of circular reasoning. It does not mean poses the question. Those are two totally different things. So there's your grammar bonus for the day. Non sequitur. They don't connect logically. Sometimes there's an otherwise logical chain of reasoning and everything works fine. A lot of times there are just statements made and those statements have nothing to do with each other. Does not follow. There is no logical relationship between the two notions. My basement flooded last week. I should get a haircut. Both of those things are true. That doesn't mean that they're connected in any way. It's a non sequitur. Having the conversation where I say my basement flooded, I should get a haircut, is just, it doesn't follow. There's a whole bunch of logical steps that are missed in between here. Laura Adikio, I hope I'm saying that correctly, bakes great cookies. She should be our next governor. I love cookies. Well, I think we need a new governor. It doesn't mean that the cookie baker should be the one who is the next governor. The straw man or straw person. The straw man fallacy attacks arguments no one is making and tries to portray the opponent's position as more extreme or far less coherent than it actually is. It's an oversimplification of the argument. And again, I'm going to say that almost all the time, it is making it far more extreme than the regular argument. And the arguer who sets up the straw man always wants to win points by knocking down the straw man instead of the argument that was actually being made. So, for example, environmentalists won't be happy until everyone is forced to be a vegan and prohibited from owning a car. The fact that one is worried about global warming, or the fact that one is worried about groundwater pollution, or the fact that one is worried about all sorts of dangers being posed to endangered species, doesn't mean that they are going to force everyone to be a vegan. That doesn't mean that no one's going to buy cars or be able to own cars. It doesn't mean that we're all going to be in grocery stores having people screaming at us about blood on our hands and meat is murder. And I'm quite sure there are a lot of environmentalists who enjoy a burger. The fact of the matter is, it's a straw man. It is moving the point to an extreme that no real environmentalist, I believe, makes. People who say happy holidays want to ban Christmas. Maybe people who say happy holidays have a lot of Jewish friends. Maybe people who say happy holidays are Jewish. They don't celebrate Christmas. Muslims don't celebrate Christmas. Lots of people don't celebrate Christmas, and yet they want to be polite and wish people happy holidays. Maybe people say happy holidays because they want to include Thanksgiving, which they think gets skipped over in the rush to buy Christmas presents. Maybe people who say happy holidays just want to make sure that they don't forget anything between Thanksgiving and Groundhog Day, or between Halloween and Groundhog Day. It doesn't mean that they want to ban Christmas. It takes things to an illogical extreme. And finally, I think on the straw man fallacy, if you want to increase funding for education, you must be a communist. I mean, there's even a communist education flag with a pencil and a compass, or a protractor, all of those sorts of things happening to destroy the idea that, we're going to become communists if we increase funding for education. The red herring. The red herring wants to change the subject, put out some irrelevant claims to throw readers or listeners off the trail. A red herring is an effort to change the subject, oftentimes rather dramatically. It wants to avoid the key issues. It doesn't want to address arguments. It just wants to move the conversation away from whatever's happening right now. It doesn't misrepresent the opponent's position. What the red herring does is it just ignores it. It's as if it never happened. So, customers have complained about the quality of our products. We're offering reduced prices and free shipping till the end of the year. Obviously, free shipping covers crappy products. We don't want to spend $5 in free shipping. We'll spend $40 on free shipping, because even if the other thing was 35 and 5 and it was the same thing, we don't care. It's a red herring. We're moving on to discuss the free shipping and the benefits of free shipping. We're not going to talk about crappy products. A young kid today says, "Dad, it's hard to live on my salary." And the father goes to, "When I was your age, I made only $40 a week." Never mind that When I was in your age, $40 a week would have been pretty good salary because I think my first rent was $40 a month for the apartment. Gas was around 50 cents a gallon. $40 a week, I could kind of make that. Okay. Back in my day, just moved it on. And finally, well, not finally, moving to faulty analogies. The comparisons don't match. It's apples and oranges while you're saying it's apples to apples and oranges to oranges. And also, they're not really alike in the relevant thing to whatever it is you're talking about. And they need to match up feature to feature. Otherwise, it just becomes an illegitimate argument. Politicians and diapers should be changed frequently and for the same reason. I think it's important to understand that we can say that a person is metaphorically full of crap. We know that diapers are literally full of crap. That doesn't mean that all politicians are full of crap. And the fact of the matter is, changing a politician because it's full of crap probably just means you're bringing another one in. Diapers, on the other hand, there's a health issue that one certainly has to deal with. And if I can give you one quick bonus again, Mark Twain didn't make this statement originally. And if you want to check the source, just do a screen freeze and look it up. Other false analogies. And if you need any proof that this is not a professional YouTube thing, I think my cat wants to make sure that she's heard here as well. People who buy stocks are no different from people who bet on horse racing. They both risk their money with little chance of making a profit. Fact of the matter is, the house always wins in gambling. Stock market, people seem to have their retirement funds. People seem to have made money ahead of the rate of inflation. It's not an analogy that holds. And then finally, just because you need an atom to see, or a microscope to see an atom, doesn't mean that bigger binoculars are going to help you see Bigfoot. This next one, I'm just going to toss in very, very quickly because I think there are thousands of examples of it and we kind of ignore it. The paralipsis, when writers say they will not talk about something, but the fact that they're bringing it up, they're actually talking about it. And it's trying to say that I'm not going to mention the faults, but oh, by the way, here are all the faults. So quick examples. From a while back, Iron Man 2. I'm not saying I'm responsible for the longest run of uninterrupted peace. I'm not saying that I did this. I'm not saying that this is true, except Tony Stark was saying that. And of course, I'm not going to bring up rumors of my opponent's infidelities because I think it would be unfair. By mentioning them, they are indeed brought up. And then the faulty syllogism. The conclusion is erroneously drawn from some established premises. We mentioned my cat earlier. My cat has 4 legs. A dog has 4 legs. Therefore, a dog must be a cat. Or this one. Penguins are black and white. Some old TV shows are black and white. Therefore, some penguins are old TV shows. It doesn't quite work. The first 2 things are true, but the conclusion is not. I think I'll wrap this one up here. Hope everyone has a good day. Remember, we have conferences this week. If you haven't signed up, please make sure you do that. Have a good one. See you next class period or at conferences.